You are welcome back, Nigeria. You are still watching the TVC Breakfast Show. Now, President Bola Tinubu has reaffirmed Nigeria's readiness to strengthen its partnership with Germany and Siemens Energy to accelerate reforms in the power sector. Speaking during a meeting on the Presidential Power Initiative, the president said that the collaboration aims to modernize the national grid, increase transmission capacity, and expand renewable energy projects all across the country. President Tinubu restated that reliable and affordable electricity remains at the heart of his administration's economic renewal and industrialization agenda, stressing that steady power supply is key to boosting Nigeria's productivity, creating jobs, and sustaining national growth. Joining us via Zoom for this conversation is energy partner and Bloomfield Law Practice, Ayodele Oni. Good morning, sir. You're very welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, very well. I trust you are well too.
Yeah. I'm very well, thank you. Now, electricity is constantly at the forefront of our minds as Nigerians. Our light, our inverters, our gens, we're constantly reminded about the uncertainty of the electricity supply in Nigeria. Now, the president has pledged that electricity reforms will move faster. But for the average Nigerian who's just waiting for steady light, who doesn't want the food in their fridge to go bad, what does this look like aside from policy? What does it look like for our everyday life?
Well, it looks like like everything government's been doing in the past in the energy sector. When I say energy, I mean oil, gas, power. Generally speaking, the reforms will move further, right? And what the common man wants to see is to flip the switch and there's light, food doesn't get spoiled. You can have even more industries. You can have a 24-hour economy. Remember, the government has been touting a $1 trillion economy, and power is very important. And I think the president did mention, I think I saw one of the videos where he was saying that in not exactly the same words, that you cannot have true economic growth without power. Public power, and research has shown that it's not even new research, that there's a direct correlation between energy availability, public energy availability, and poverty. The less available power you have, the more people you are likely to have, or the more people you will have in poverty, right? So stuff like cottage industries will not grow. The informal sector will not grow as it should be if you do not have power. But if public power improves, then you will see more prosperity and you'd have more people taken out of poverty. They say 100 million, 130 million people are in multidimensional poverty. It does speak volume, and I think not having sufficient public power plays a critical role in that regard.
Okay, let us look at this partnership with Germany and Siemens, sorry. Tell us the magnitude of this partnership. What does Nigeria stand to gain with this partnership?
Okay, I'll take you a bit historical. Remember that late President Buhari and Chancellor Merkel met in Germany about 2019, 2020. And they had conversations, and that culminated in what's called the PPI, that the Presidential Power Initiative, such that the idea is to modernize and upgrade power transmission and distribution infrastructure across the country. The initial target was that by 2025, right? What we have now is that phase 1 is just phase 1A, so to speak, is ending in 2025. So the idea is to invest billions of dollars, and it's supposed to be a counterpart funding arrangement where the Nigerian government also does contribute money, right? Grid infrastructure, data systems, skilled operators, and I'm aware that Siemens is setting up something in Abeokuta, a training system. That's why you then continue to have skilled operators. So across the value chain, the idea is to ensure, across the electricity value chain, the idea was to ensure that we have 25,000 megawatts end-to-end. What I mean by end-to-end is operational capacity end-to-end, is such that you do not only generate, you are able to transmit or transport that power to end consumers. So it's huge. The idea is to quadruple at the end of the entire program. And initially, the idea was that by 2025, we should have 7,000 megawatts, such that you can generate and it gets to the distribution companies and final consumers. That's the idea, generally speaking. So that's what Siemens seeks to do. It's across the value chain, so that it's not, because the last data I saw, I think we have 10,000 plus megawatts of stranded capacity, generation capacity, meaning that you can generate it, but it's either you don't have gas or you don't have transmission or distribution infrastructure to be able to transport same. So it doesn't make sense to have that thing and not be able to make use of it. So I guess it's also going to ease, the idea is also to ease what would otherwise be stranded power. So it's across the value chain, and it's billions of dollars expected to be spent, and a lot has been spent already. Tens or hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on that idea.
Mr. Only, we really look forward that at the end of the day, this agreement and this partnership that has been signed between the president, or might I say now Nigeria and Siemens, would yield that kind of dividends that you're talking about. But let's talk about renewable energy. Is this only on the lines of conventional way of generating energy? Is there anything in this conversation that goes into alternative energy production as well? Because if we are only going to focus on the conventional way, do we have what it takes? And how fast will this come into light?
Okay, good question. My view has always been that we've not had much of a problem with electricity generation. What the Siemens deal does, in my view, is stuff around grid infrastructure, data systems, distribution infrastructure, and power transmission, those sort of issues. So substations and all of that doesn't deal, generally speaking, with generation in itself. If those other bottlenecks we find around transmission and distribution are dealt with, you then begin to see people invest in renewables. It's a chicken and, maybe not even a chicken and egg thing. I actually think we need to deal with transmission and distribution first, those bottlenecks, before people begin to invest in more investment in grid renewables, because there's already a lot of off-grid with the Rural Electrification Agency. There's a lot of already a lot of renewables. You hear energizing higher institutions, those sort of arrangements, some markets. But if the transmission and distribution remain a problem, it doesn't matter that you invest in renewables, you will not be able to dispatch that power. So it's not about just investing. But a lot is even happening in the north. People are talking about energy federalism. So this particular transaction or project, the PPI, the Presidential Power Initiative, isn't focused on generation, so to speak, more like dealing with the bottlenecks that are burdening those other aspects that even make nonsense of generation. You build a 2,000 megawatt power plant today, you can't dispatch it because even MBET isn't signing new PPAs. So it's not building or investing in renewables, but ensuring that what would even make the gas-fired thermal generation to get to the end user, the last mile, is even the more critical point. If you don't do that, then no one's even going to invest because they know they can't dispatch and get their money. I hope that's clear. But yes, renewables are important.
Let me put this question in now, because you talked about power, I can't remember how you use the phrase now, energy federalism. Thank you, Lamide. And that's really important, because that's some of the conversation that is going around bottleneck issues. You just said, if in Lagos we're able to generate the power that is needed in the state, should there still be that conversation of transmitting it to the National Bank, from then sent around the country, wherein it now comes back to Lagos less than what Lagos generated in the first place?
Good question. And it goes to the Enron deal. If you remember, when the president was Lagos State governor, he tried to do a deal. But at that time, we did not have the Electricity Act or even the EPSRA, which the Electricity Act replaces. Now, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, which is the old 2005 law, the idea was to ensure that there's private participation in the power sector, right? To ensure reforms around privatization. Now, with the Electricity Act, states have the powers to create their own electricity markets and manage, whether wholesale, I think state wholesale and retail, I think wholesale is not just federal. You can have a state wholesale and you can have a retail arrangement. So Lagos State can generate and move it around Lagos alone, because it's taken over. If you check the law, I think it's section 230 subsection 2 or so, where states can take over, and Lagos State is one of the states that have taken over. It's still nascent, it's still young, it's still new, relatively new, so a lot is already going on. So it's not the old rule where you generate, you have to send to the transmission company of Nigeria, which is now even been broken down to TSP and the NISO. You don't have to do that anymore. You can keep it within your state if you can be investment attractive, right? So that guys can come and invest in that sector across generation to distribution, and you can distribute it within the state. You don't need to anymore send it to the national grid, so to speak, or the transmission company of Nigeria to now send you much less than what you had initially sent there. It's an old rule, it's an old policy that no longer existed during when the current president was governor. That's why he couldn't succeed with the Enron deal, if you remember the Enron deal. But it's no longer the case. States now have sufficient powers to keep power within their state and regulate how it moves and how it functions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oni. And I must say the president's promise is very promising. It's great news. But over the past 2 decades, Nigeria has seen multiple electricity reform programs that either faced delay or had a limited impact. Based on our past experiences, what lessons should our current administration take from those past experiences to ensure that the president's promise of faster electricity reform programs really takes effect and really succeeds? At this point in time, what should our government prioritize in this Nigeria, in our electricity landscape, to make this promise a success?
Okay. Good policy are above politics. So if you have politics above good policies, you will continue to have the problem. E.g., I think the government made the right decision removing subsidy. Government in oil and gas downstream, government made the right policy around leaving currency value to free market, uniforming that aspect. But if they had considered the politics ahead of good policy, they wouldn't have done that. Oh, we need to win the next elections. So if government does put policy ahead, good policy ahead of politics, we're more likely to succeed. And to be fair, other governments have done their own role to an extent. I mean, many of them didn't succeed that much, but they did do a bit. Like Obasanjo did start all of the reforms with the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, and Jonathan did ensure we had privatization. I think each could have done more if policy was ahead of politics and not the other way around. So I think what this government just needs to do, has smart people running different ministries, departments, and agencies, but they then need to ensure that good policy is above politics. And I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, they know what to do. Just ensure that policies are above politics.
That would be a tall order, because we have politicians everywhere in government. In fact, they make up the government. But what is worrisome to me is the state of the electricity infrastructure that we have right now in Nigeria. Taking that into cognizance, how will this deal revamp the kind of infrastructure that we have and introduce more to carry the level of generation that will be made available?
We're already doing that. The initiative is already doing that. The number of substations have been done, transformers have been put in place, and I believe government is also been providing its own counterpart funding. So that's been done. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had that meeting with the president, and they wouldn't be saying they are closing the funding for that phase 1, right? So that's been done. It's like when you are building a house. In the beginning, it just looks like, what's this? Until it gets to advanced levels before you begin to appreciate it. So until there's the interconnection of all of the equipment before, for example, for a long time, we struggled with what is called SCADA, Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It's technology that ensures that you can monitor your network. But that's in place now. I mean, I understand it's being perfected, but that's in place now, right? So it looks like, well, it's being done in modules. So you're right, infrastructure now needs to match the volume of electricity that may be dispatched to reduce or to eliminate completely stranded power. So I think government has been providing its counterpart funding, and that the equipment have now been put in place. For a while, it's been that case. And every now and then, you hear that there was one in Aja or one in Ikorodu, some additional substation and infrastructure and equipment for same. So it's going on. It's not just going to happen in one day. That's it.
Yeah. I know this Energy Federation matter, we talked about earlier, was part of the recommendation from the constitutional confab that was had, a few years ago. And states like Abia, Lagos, a few other ones are jumping in to generate their own power. And so what I produce stays with me and I have fun with it. But whilst we're waiting to see the realization of this signed partnership between Nigeria and Siemens, now Germany, what can we do in the interim to reduce the number of collapsed national grid every other day in the country? What can the government do now while we wait for the big day to happen?
Okay, so the thing is that some of those things have been done, and I think it's not been as commonplace in the last, say, 6 months, 1 year as it used to be. What does happen at times? There are technical reasons and there are commercial reasons. One of the technical commercial reasons is what they call spinning reserves. And you see this governor, I'm sure you'd have seen some NERC regulation around free governor. You want to ensure that once a power plant, so power moves like this, equal in, equal out. If there's a mismatch, you can have a grid imbalance and you would have those grid challenges. But if before it happens, another power plant can kick in, that's what they call spinning reserves. So those sort of issues are both commercial because you have to be paying for it, and technical. Technical in the sense that you have an emergency management system that consists a number of things, including a SCADA that ensures that you can manage cases of an emergency before it gets out of hand. And another thing that needs to be done, if you look at some parts of the north, the grid is radial, so that if there's a cut in one part or a challenge in one part, it affects the entire almost the northeast and part of the northwest. So those need to be dealt with, and the easier hanging fruit, part of what NERC is doing is to ensure that when there's an imbalance, something kicks in by generators very quickly. So you've got those commercial arrangements around what we do have, ancillary services, what they call them, and then you have technical ones such as redesigning parts of the grid, which will think into what Siemens is doing.
So is any of what you've mentioned now around infrastructure? Did you hear the question I just asked you, Ms. Oni?
No. I lost it for a bit.
Is any of the things, is any of the issues you identified now around dilapidating infrastructure?
Yes, absolutely. So it's dilapidating infrastructure and outdated infrastructure stroke technology. So if you have both, then you'd have a challenge. But it's part of what the PPI is here to resolve. But I said there are also hanging fruits that are regulatory through commercial, which NERC is also working with generation companies to achieve. So yes, that's where we are at the moment. So a lot is going on behind the scenes.
Mr. Oni, thank you so much. I would love to end on a very inspiring note. Can you tell us, give us a day in the life of a Nigerian who is living under a regime that is successful electrically? If these reforms succeed, what will our daily lives look like on ground?
Yeah, you don't need to plan when you iron your clothes. You will begin to see people do business at 1, 2, 3, 4 a.m. You can walk to the barber shop. I mean, that would also work with security. Even that would improve security, right? You can go to the barber shop at 2 a.m. to have a haircut. You know that you can get items. There'd be more supermarkets open at that time. You don't need to say, oh, there might not be light, let me go iron my clothes for 2 days. You just wake up, flip the switch without thinking about it. It becomes as a matter of course for us, and we will take it for granted. That'd be success. by an administration.
Amazing. I love that analogy because I know that I ironed last night. I know what I went through. Thank you so much, Mr. Oni, for illuminating and electrifying this conversation. Have a great day ahead. We're grateful.
Thank you very much for having me. And enjoy.